Thank you. As he said, my name's Wes Rutland-Brown. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration, but I'm with the California Division Office based in Sacramento. I'm actually here today presenting a national perspective presentation developed by two of my colleagues, Ron Vaughn and Chris Allen, who are with our Office of Highway Policy Information in DC. They were not able to be here today, and I worked with them some on this project in an advisory role, and so they asked me if I would be willing to give the presentation. So you all are stuck with me today, and I'm going to do the best I can to talk to you about our stovepipes we have in FHWA and some of the efforts at data integration we're trying to do to make that better. So what do I mean by stovepipes in FHWA? Lots of organizations have them. You'd be surprised to learn the government has stovepipes too, I'm sure. But FHWA has several large data systems, and most of these data systems were developed decades ago in isolation from one another, and so they became very stovepiped in their purposes and what they were able to provide. FHWA has finally realized that that's not necessarily a good thing, that data integration provides a lot of utility, and we're trying to work retroactively to make those systems communicate better and share information with each other better. So the goal of this process is tools that will better enable us to integrate, analyze, and visualize this data across various federal highway data systems. So what I'm going to do in the presentation today is explain to you first what those data systems are. I know many of you may not be familiar with a lot of what Federal Highways data is, and then talk about the background of two different systems we're using to do that, and I'll explain what these are later, ITDP and HiPat, and then talk about some of the potential uses, and we're trying to go from there. So Federal Highway data, what do I mean? There are really four data systems that I'm going to talk about as part of this process. The first one is HPMS, the Highway Performance Monitoring System. This is the system that provides us information about our roads. This is how we know what roads are out there, what the condition of the pavement is on those roads, what the condition of the traffic is on those roads. It's that road inventory system. And perhaps most importantly, since 2010, it's given us a linear referencing system base layer for all the roads within a state. By next year, it should include all public roads within a state. And for data integration, having that base layer of what is the road inventory is really key. The second system we're talking about integrating is the NBI, the National Bridge Inventory. Just like the HPMS on roads, this is the corollary system for bridges. It provides an inventory of all the bridges that exist in a state, as well as the condition, the age, and service of those bridges. It also has a geospatial component, but completely different from the other one. It's a lat-long single point as opposed to an LRS system. So NBI, HPMS are two of the major condition systems we're trying to integrate. The third system that we're working at for integration is called VIS. It's our Financial Management Information System. It's really the only national system we have that tells us anything about the projects that are currently being done on the roads and bridges. It's a financial system designed for the purposes of financial record keeping. So most of the information we have in there is financial, but it does provide a lot of key milestone dates for projects as well, such as when the project starts construction. VIS is not currently geospatial, but that component is being added as of next year. And the last system is one that's kind of phasing out, but it's really one of the ones that brought all this together, and that is RADS, the Recovery Act Data System. With the American Recovery and Rehabilitation Act that was enacted several years ago, billions of additional dollars were pumped into the economy, and part of that was a much more comprehensive expectation of reporting on those projects. And RADS provided detailed project-level information, milestones, and geospatial information just on the subject of ARA projects. So I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's really important because it was the first real integrated data set that Federal Highways started out with that goal, and it showed people a lot of what should be possible with integration. So how are we going about this integration? What's the platform we're using? This is the Integrated Transportation Data Platform is what we're calling it, and it's just a conceptual way of trying to bring some of these databases together. This is a conceptual diagram. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but basically in the middle here we have our data integration platform, and around it we have our four different systems. Right now those systems in isolation answer some questions, but not as many as they could. Our VIS system, for example, tells us information about projects, but it doesn't on its own know anything about what roads are out there, what bridges are out there, what their condition is, so we could get some information from it. Similarly, our bridge system over here knows about bridges and conditions, but knows nothing about what projects are currently going on those bridges. So by conceptually bringing these diagrams or these databases together, there's a lot more questions we could answer that we couldn't answer right now. And that's one of the goals of this process. This is the same kind of slide, but in a different perspective. This is more architecturally and structurally how is this process going to work. We have, again, those separate data sources over here, those stovepipes of excellence where they have those systems. And what we're trying to do through the ITDP platform is bring an output from all of these systems together. There are different cycles depending on how often that data is updated, but we're basically bringing together one electronic data warehouse in which all that data can reside collectively in which we can do something with it. And there are various things we can do to integrate it and bring it together, but one of the most useful tools is just simple, better data analytics and data visualization. Most of those systems were developed around compiling all this data, but didn't necessarily make it user-friendly or easy to use, and certainly didn't do integration. So as part of this integration platform, we're also focusing on just making that data more user-friendly for a lot of our users who are not used to dealing with and looking at large amounts of data and trying to draw conclusions from it. The ITDP has several major components. One of them is dashboards, and by dashboards, these are just really quick looks at the data, way to quickly look at the data and kind of see and get a feel for what's going on. And there are really 5 dashboards we've done there. One is on infrastructure, one's on federal aid projects, one's on Recovery Act projects, one on roadway, and one on bridges. And those pretty much mirror the different information we're getting from those data sets I mentioned before. The other part are the more advanced tools. We have a more advanced ad hoc query for analysis of the data that I'll show you. And then the real visualization tool is HiPat. This is the Highway Infrastructure Performance Analysis tool, and I'll talk about that one in more detail separately. This is just to let you know where this system is right now. Right now, this integrated system is not publicly available. It resides behind the UPAC's firewall, which is a system where Federal Highway houses a lot of their systems. Even within Federal Highway, most employees don't yet have access to this because it's very much still in the design stage. So there are a few of us, like me out in the field, who are considered primary users of this, who help them play around with it in development, but they're working on making this, hopefully in the long run, to be more publicly available. The other point I want to make is this whole data integration initiative partly came about because of a performance objective in Federal Highway's strategic implementation plan. For the last 3 years, the specific topic of data analysis and integration has been one of the 10 to 15 focus areas of the Federal Highway Administration on moving forward with their data. So this is a big part of what Federal Highway has recognized as a weakness and an opportunity to do something better in terms of data integration. So this is inside the ITTP platform. This is sort of what it looks like for a user that comes in. As I mentioned before, there are these 5 basic dashboards listed across the top, and then those 2 more advanced tools, HiPad and ad hoc query. We're looking right now at the bridge dashboard, and it's really just a quick visualization of data that's within the bridge inventory. When it comes up here, it's got some blank gauges, and you can specify what year of data you're interested in looking at. You can specify which state's data you want to look at. And when you pick that, your gauges go into motion and help you visualize this data. And we can learn about this, about structurally deficient bridges and functionally obsolete bridges, which is 2 of the categories Federal Highways looks at for performance on bridges. You can also switch between gauges and a pie chart to get a little bit more robust information. We have the same basic data over here, but instead of a gauge, we see those percentages as part of the pie chart compared to the 70% of bridges that have no problems, that are not deficient. And then we start to get to the more advanced abilities of this tool to tie data together. This is from the NBI data, and this data over here is from VIS, and it helps to start answering the question, well, that's the condition of your bridges, but what are you doing about it? And this shows all dollars programmed in VIS for work on bridges across 4 different program codes during the year 2011. So it's starting to let people look at the performance data and the project level data and what's being done in combination. Again, it's still pretty basic. It's just to get a visual idea of what's going on. If you want to do something a little more advanced, you switch to our ad hoc query tool, which is a business objects-based reporting tool. It pulls major elements of various data sets together and allows you to kind of quickly and easily start to visualize and play with your data. This up here is a sort of a big selection box of different pieces of data from our bridge inventory system. And when you pick something, it'll make a nice graph of it down here for you, and it will also provide some summary tables. So in this case, we're talking about structural length by state, showing just the top 12 states, and you can see that Texas has the most bridges and by length. And if you didn't know that, you'd see that they're ahead of California, for example. Again, this is not very advanced. This is just showing the tip of the iceberg, what you can do. You also can pick multiple data things to look at the same time. Here we're looking at both deck width combined with annual average daily traffic, which you get from the HPMS system, and you can put them together in the same graph. And we see again, this time a bar graph showing those 2 pieces of information, again by state. And you might say, well, I'm not interested in state. I actually want to look at trends over time. So you can change from showing it by state to showing it by record year, and your graph will immediately change and say, here's your data by record year. And you can look at this and say, well, that's not very useful because I have 2 bar graphs with 2 very different information, deck width and average annual daily traffic. Let me change that from a bar graph to a line graph and maybe see if they're somewhat related. You would think the deck width might be related to the amount of traffic on it, which is kind of the way it makes sense. But you might say, I'm not really interested in all the bridges in a state. I'm actually just interested in those that are structurally deficient. So you can put in a filter and limit your data to just show that aspect of it. So again, I know compared to a lot of the presentations we're seeing out here about what people are doing, this is pretty basic. But for the federal government and what we've been able to do before, this is pretty advanced for what we're trying to do internally with our own data to make it more visual, make it more useful by the division offices to start analyzing their data and understanding it a little bit better. So that tool is really based around just analyzing the data, showing quick dashboards of it. This really got started through the HiPad initiative, and this is a geospatial tool for helping visualize the data even better and put it on maps. So HiPad is the Highway Information Performance Analysis tool. It was used to assess the overall conditions of the federal aid system. So again, the main sources being that thing on pavements and roadways and traffic and the thing on bridges. So the HPMS, NBI, RADS, and then the big next step for this will be FEMAS, the project level tracking system when it gets that geospatial component, which is supposed to happen by fall of next year. That'll be a big addition to this process as well. One thing I want to say as I go forward these graphics, everyone gets all excited about federal highway and MAP 21 and performance measures. I don't have all the secret answers as to what the performance measures are going to be. So anything I show you here about looking at data by certain breakdowns, it's just for informational. It's one way you can do it, but it's not saying this is the only way you can do it and the way federal highway is going to do it. Again, the focus here is on roadways and bridges because that's what we have the data on, but I think it'll be very easy for you to see how we should be able to use this platform to start building upon it, to add in safety data, to add in environmental data, to add in planning data, and to add in other data sets as we move forward. So this is the HiPat system with an ITDP. When you go in, it asks you what state you want to look at. You can look at the whole country if you want to, but it will slow the system down dramatically, so picking a state or a selection of states will certainly make it move a lot quicker. When you're in the system, again, up here at the top, there's a project level component, which I'm not going to talk about because it really needs FEMAS. Right now, we just show RADS projects. There's an infrastructure component that I'm talking about now, and then at the end, I'm going to talk briefly on this health report component. Within the infrastructure component, they're really on any of these four major components to HiPat. One is the map section up here, where you can visually see whatever data you're picking on a map. There's the data table, and this is really the driver of all the information. You pick what data goes in that table, and it's going to put it on the map, and then also do these other two things here. It'll put it on a chart, whatever information you want to look at, and then it does summary statistics of whatever data you're looking at. So the idea here is to make it very visually and easy for someone to go in and select what data they want to look at, see it on a map, see it on a chart, see it in a summary table, and help understand that data better. And I'm going to zoom in and talk about each one of these sections a little bit more. The map, an easy target for visualization, something we want to talk about. Again, for federal highway, getting our data on a map was a pretty big step forward for us. You can pick the state, you can pick which functional system you want to look at. We're looking at here a map of Colorado interstates, basically, and we're looking at two different components on it. One is AADT, annual average daily traffic. That's in lines that you can barely see. They're underneath here like that yellow line. And then the other one is bridge age, ranging from 1 to 10 years to 51 years old, structure age. So you can quickly look at something like that and get a visual of where some of the older bridges may be, where some of the new ones are, where your traffic is. You can change the map to show different components of it. This one's just looking at IRI, which is International Roughness Index. It's a pavement measurement, and you can break it down by various categories and see where some of your pavement may need more improvement visually on a map. Some of the basic tools we can do with that to zoom in and kind of understand our universe a little bit better. This is a zoomed in detail showing, what are we looking at, IRI and bridges at the same time on various roads. You can choose how well it plots the road information on there. The less detail you want it to be, the quicker it'll do it. If I were to specify, it could make these lines a lot more accurate. We had to make a lot of business decisions to make this work. As I mentioned before, it's not right off the bat easy to do because NBI, for example, collects data on lat-long coordinates with a single point, and HPMS has an LRS with the entire system mapped on it. So they quickly came up with some computer modules to try to put the bridges on the roads the way they should be, but we end up with some bridges that are off here in the middle of buildings that aren't entirely accurate. And so it was trying to make accommodations for time to make this a little more doable. And you see also you can change it to show your map and again show your data tables so you can move between the various objectives. It's a map like you see in Google and other places you see where you can pan around the map, zoom in, zoom out, and it will change dynamically. It's not just a static map interface, what you get. So we can zoom into a specific map, and if we actually find a specific bridge we're interested in, we can click on it and bring up all our information that we have from our NBI system on that bridge. This is not something that any BI system does on its own. You can't look at a bridge on a map and click on it. This is something that was only brought to us by using this tool. We have different base layers for the maps. You can look at the satellite layer, but you can also, of course, change it to remove that and just look at the road layer, which makes it a little easier to see your data and where your bridges are on that map. So just basically to look at your data, to see it on a map and understand it was helpful, but this also brings us to more advanced data mining that we can do with this as well. Back to our original map here, this is AADT and bridge age, again, for the whole system. We can pick to specify it and limit it more and limit it just to our interstate system, show just a specific layer we want to. This is AADT on the interstate, the traffic you would see. You could go to the data table and limit what the data table is showing by putting in any number of filters on what data is being shown, and then click and it will regenerate the map based on that. This is highlighting just the NHS interstate bridges on the map. We can then go back and specify different filters, like I just want to see those bridges that are in satisfactory condition from there, and limit it even further, helping you visualize where you may want to target projects or initiatives may be a difference. We can go to our summary table and look at that and say, look at the age and years of those satisfactory bridges. They range from 11 years old to 80 years old. Let me see that in a graphic by limiting it further, and you can bring up the chart to see where the bridges are, and you can click on a specific layer of the chart. Like here, I want to see where those 41 to 50-year-old bridges are, and go back to the map and it limits your data there. So you can switch between the different ways of looking at your data, and the tool changes to show you just what you're interested in looking at. This, again, for federal highways, is a big step forward in helping to visualize and use our data better. Another advantage to this is the ability to look at corridors or cross-state data. As I said at the beginning, you can pick to look at one state or you can look at multiple states. A lot of the systems right now in federal highway were designed around looking at one state at a time, but obviously when we're talking about traffic or other things, we're interested in the entire corridor. This is an example of the entire I-95 corridor from DC down to, we're getting into Florida here, I guess. And you can look at the whole route and look at the IRI on that route and see which state or where along that route might you be most concerned about pavement, and see there's much more yellow sections in Virginia, for example, than somewhere else. So it helps you look at corridor planning and management, not just within your state. This visualization tool has also been really helpful for data quality. This is a map of Kansas and their bridge data when it came in. As you might expect, the bridges are falling along the lines where you'd expect the roads to be, but we get about halfway across the state and the bridges all disappear. Either it got really flat and we ran out of bridges, or something happened to their data. If we were to zoom out in the map and look, we found all their bridges. They were landing off the coast of Portugal. It's one of those things that was harder to catch before because they all had lat-long coordinates in there. It looked good. You thought it was fine. But when you put it on a map, you realize, oh, well, they got one coordinate off on this whole section of bridges, and now they're off somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. So pretty basic, but it's really quick and easy. This is something that you can catch right off the bat with a map that if you're just looking at a data table would take a lot longer to figure out. This other component is kind of a prototype one they're just working on, the infrastructure health report. All that data is really useful if you want to mine it, if you want to take the time to work through it. But if you want to get the big picture, why can't we summarize that data and give you the big picture of it? So you can pick a state or a corridor or whatever section of road, filter it down to what you want, and when you've picked it out, this is what I'm interested in, you can switch the tab over here to the health report. And what it will do is sort of summarize that data you said you're interested in. So this happens to be a summary of the state of Florida. I can see they've got a few bridges they need to fix that are somewhere out there in the ocean. This is the Keys, so those are okay. And it will basically grade your overall health. How are you looking in terms of good, fair, poor health on your roads? We've worked closely with the Office of Infrastructure to what they think would be good breakdowns to do this. And you can get even more advanced tables on this is the overall bridge health report, where you look at things like age, condition, deck, and it will show you what % of your bridges from whatever you picked are falling into various categories to help you understand your universe better. And you can also get just an overall summary of bridges and pavement together, graphically showing overall how is your assets doing, how do they look for that health for, again, that state or that section or whatever you're interested in. And of course, we can add this over time trend component as we get more years of data in here to show if you're making investments that are making things better or not. And that's a big part of where MAP 21 is going, and having states look at their infrastructure and looking at what investments they're doing and how they may be paying off. So where do we go from here? How do we use this data? You've probably already seen and figured a lot of this out for yourself. Federal Highway really has two roles here. One is a stewardship role and one is an oversight role. In an oversight role, we're here as the federal authority trying to make sure you do everything correctly. We don't often like to think of that role, but that's really one of our main purposes. And this tool can be very helpful just to make sure certain federal requirements are being met. are bridges that are getting money federally eligible. When you can bring them up on a map, see them with all the combined data, it can be very quickly to tell as compared to looking at a data table. Data quality issues on submissions, much easier to see and fix when you can put them on a map and see how we're doing. And then also there are a lot of potentials for planning, design alternatives when you start looking at these multiple data sets in combination, can put them all on a map together. Our other role, and the one we like to spend a lot more of our energy on, is stewardship. That's just more efficient and effective use of funds. And again, from stewardship perspective, I think you can see how these kind of tools can be useful. We can start looking at safety data analysis, looking at a road, looking at traffic, hopefully sometime looking at safety data on it, and seeing if that road is where we want it to be, if it's a good use of providing enhanced safety. We can evaluate the impacts of infrastructure investments over time. When we start being able to show where we're doing projects, we can look at the health of a system or a corridor and see if it's improving. This is really going to help us visualize and help to understand that. And then lastly, it can really help with this multi-state corridor level planning. We see a lot of great things being done here by MPOs or states, but when you want to start rolling it up to a higher level, you are unfortunately sometimes dependent on the feds to bring all that together, and we're trying to make steps to make our data more integratable and usable to look at an entire corridor or across state boundaries to help support this kind of initiative. So that's the primary thing I wanted to show you today, and I'll be happy to answer what questions I can, but I'm certainly going to refer you to our main experts and headquarters who've developed this tool if there are questions beyond me, so I wanted to make sure you had that their contact information available. So thank you all for your time.